Hi, welcome everybody. I'm going to be muting some of your mics. All right. My co-host can also help me with muting some mics. Okay, so welcome everybody to our Design Thinking Gumbo. This is our first workshop in a series of workshops where we are sharing with you a delicious mix of ingredients around design research tools and methods. I mean, we're trying to help you expand your taste for design thinking and design research. I'm Leslie Ann Noel, and I am the Associate Director of Design Thinking for Social Impact at the Phyllis M. Taylor Center for Social Innovation and Design Thinking. And Design Thinking Gumbo is one of our new projects this season, this semester, where this project is actually going to be led by graduate assistants who are interested in design research. And what we're doing is the graduate assistants chose the research method that they're interested in, and then we worked with them. I supported them to build the workshop out. We're going to have 5 workshops over the next few weeks. We'll actually post all of the registration links in the chat throughout the workshop. The next workshop is going to be about using poetry in design research, and it's going to happen on November 9th, and it's going to be led by Sneha Root. But today we're going to be led by Natalie Hudanick. And so I am going to now revert to an assistant role, and Natalie is going to take the lead. So over to you, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Hudanick. I'm a graduate assistant for design thinking for social impact at Taylor Center, like Leslie said. I'm also a second-year Master of Public Health candidate at Tulane School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. I'm specializing in maternal and child health. And I also have a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology. So ethnography is something I've gotten multiple classes in on how to do. And hopefully I get to share those skills with you today. And I'm really excited about being able to do that. So to start, I just want to warm up a little bit today to get everybody going because it's a workshop, so we're going to have lots of participation. So for our warm up, I'd just like you all to share one word that describes how you're feeling at this moment. So you can just unmute yourself and then say that one word, or you can drop it in the chat box. It's okay if we talk over each other. It's just about being warming up and just having fun. So I got some time.
Excited.
Yeah. I feel that. Nice.
Hungry.
Yeah, I'm extremely hungry too right now. I'm excited. Oh yeah, I'm glad everybody's excited to be here. Yeah, it's been a long, stressful year. So we're all, yes. Okay, awesome. I'm really excited you're all here, and I think we're gonna have a great workshop. So to start, the COVID-19 pandemic has created this unique opportunity to explore ethnography in a virtual setting. So what we're going to do today is talk about ethnography and how we can apply it virtually to understand people's experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the session is being recorded, and we'll be taking screenshots to feature on the Taylor Center website and social medias. So if you don't want your name to be shown, you can edit that on your own Zoom little window. Or if you don't want your picture shown, you can just turn off your video camera. So we are first going to go over what ethnography is and who typically uses this method. So ethnography is, by definition, the systematic study of culture. And another way to think of ethnography, though, that is probably considered more relevant to design thinking, it would be to define ethnography as ways to see how people make sense of the world in everyday life. How do people go about their life, and how do they interact with their environment? And one of the main disciplines in which ethnography is the primary method of research is anthropology. In anthropology, ethnographic fieldwork uses the various tools within ethnography to research other ways of life and knowing. And while ethnography is typically known for its use in the social sciences, it can ultimately be used by anyone who wants to research groups of people, cultures, and life.
So, Natalie, what are some tools that we could use within ethnography?
Great question, Leslie. There are 4 main tools within ethnography to ultimately to collect qualitative information. That is participant observation, interviews, surveys, and archival research. So participant observation is typically the method most associated with ethnography, as it requires you to gather research by actively participating and incorporating yourself into the group of people, culture, or environment you are studying. Participant observation typically forms a continuum ranging from completely removed from what you are researching, which is the complete observer, to completely involved as a participant or a complete participant, basically. And so anywhere on that range is participant observation, and typically based on the environment you're studying and who you're studying or working with depends on what you're going to become. So with surveys, there are like the most common tools next to participant research, participant observation, and they're most often used in conjunction with participant observation. So there are 3 types of surveys: structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Structured interviews are basically when you develop a questionnaire and then you only follow the questionnaire throughout the interview. And then semi-structured interviews have guided questions that you would like to have answered, but it's not really strict on whether the interview has to follow those questions. It can still somewhat be of a conversation between the interviewer and the interviewee. And lastly, unstructured interviews or informal interviews are when there are no questions laid out. It is essentially a conversation, sometimes recorded, sometimes not. And most often there are no questions laid out. Most often, unstructured interviews can get you the richest information as it takes away a bit of the strictness of questionnaires and is just about having a conversation. So the next tool, surveys, are another tool, and they are very similar to structured interviews with that they follow a questionnaire. And they're typically about collecting data and doing it quickly. So that could be demographic information or quick answers. And the questions, while all laid out, they usually have options for participants to pick from their answer, like income level or things like scales that you could easily do quickly. And then the last tool I'm going to go over briefly is archival research. And this typically involves looking at past documents, materials, records, etc. of the group being researched. It can be used to learn about cultures of the past or people of the past. And it can also be used along with surveys, interviews, and participant observation to help form a more thorough picture of the group or user or whoever you are researching to gain qualitative information about. So ethnography can be a great tool for design thinking. It can be used to study the relationships, interactions, environments between the user and the issue. Leslie, as a design thinker, how do you think ethnography can be more employed in design thinking?
Well, I think that we actually we use ethnography a lot in design and design research, and we don't know that we're using it. You know, we borrow a lot of anthropology tools as we're doing design research. So what you talked about, most designers will do surveys or have interviews. And, you know, we use different types of interviews because we're often trying to get qualitative information. We probably don't use archival research as much as we use the other methods. But because we talk about empathy so much, those interviews become a good place for us to understand people and their experiences.
So also within design thinking is looking at the research and the method tools you're using critically. And in a sense, for ethnography, we're going to talk about critical ethnography, which is basically a lens about challenging the established practice of ethnography And in doing so, understanding that there is no objectivity or neutral observer in using this method. And I think when we're doing COVID-19 research, that is incredibly important, because what we're seeing is never objective as it really is. So the COVID-19 pandemic has created a unique challenge in which to apply ethnography. With everyone remote, we need to think of more creative ways to use it to understand how people make sense of their environment. And so how do we use ethnography remotely to understand the pandemic? Some of these new opportunities allow for more acknowledgement of subjectivity, like I just talked about, within ethnographic research. What you see virtually is what your participant or informant wants you to see, and most often through their video backgrounds. Interviews may also not be as convenient as they have been in the past. Interviewees may not be in the perfect environment at the time to complete an interview. They could be driving, cooking, taking care of children, doing anything else than what normally you would be doing for an interview. The imperfectness that may arise from virtual research can possibly allow for a better look into the lives of people. And so these are the things we are going to be looking at, is how to best utilize ethnography to see how people are understanding and living during the COVID-19 pandemic. So our activities today will be about exploring observations and qualitative style interviews in a virtual setting, what we can make of these observations, and specifically how it relates to COVID-19. So for our first activity, when you registered for this workshop, we had you all submit a photo of something in your immediate vicinity or living space that has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, along with a little reflection about the photo. So these photographs will help us look at how we can do virtual ethnography through observation. All the photos and reflections were put together on a mural board, and we're going to drop the link to that in the chat box for all of you to see all the submissions to use during this activity. And so I'm going to switch my screens really quick to show you that mural. And so this is what it looks like when you click on the link. And so on the left-hand side is where we'll have our first activity, and where we have all the photos. And each of the photos have a number above that'll correspond to the breakout room that you'll be placed in, and which photo you'll be observing. And so how it works is you can zoom in and out with your mouse pad to get to the photo. And then for each of the photos, there's little sticky notes or dots underneath, and you just do one click on the dot, and then you can just immediately start typing your thoughts on it. And so that's how we're going to be recording all your answers today, so you can take notes within your little activities and everything. And then basically what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to switch my screen again back to my presentation. So the questions you're going to be looking at, which you can see on your mural as well at the top of the page, the left-hand side, you're going to think about these questions within your mural, within your groups. What do you see? What does the photograph tell you? And from the given photograph, how do you think the person is handling the COVID-19 pandemic? So you can take notes on these under each of the photos you are assigned within your breakout groups. And then when we come back from our breakout room time, I'm going to have at least one person from each breakout room report back on what they talked about. So.
Well, before you go, I want to remind everyone, as you get into the breakout room, just figure out who are the people in the room with you. And then, yes, you're going to follow Natalie's questions, which if you're looking for them, because they're on the screen now, but they're in the mural above the photographs. So the questions are, what does the photograph tell you? What do you see? And how do you think the person is handling the COVID-19 pandemic? And back to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Leslie. If you guys have any other questions about mural that I can answer right now before I send you into your breakout rooms. No. Okay, so Naisha, are we ready for the breakout rooms or?
Yep, all the rooms are open.
Okay, sounds good. So you guys should be going into your breakout rooms soon, right? Renee, I think. Yeah. Hi everyone, welcome back. So you guys had a lot of observations. I was looking at the mural, but I just wanted to debrief a bit about this activity. And I wanted to talk about what were some themes we can pull out from the photos, or the themes you specifically or your group pulled out from the photos. How did you go about your observations? And what can this observational method tell us about COVID? So does anybody have any ideas or want to speak out before I start calling on breakout rooms?
Well, people are redefining their space. They're redefining social relations. They're redefining their social activities. For a while, we couldn't go outside, so the outside was being brought in, with the plants. I like the one where someone said first that simple word hope with the small green plant. Very few people commented on the dog, but I have a cat with me, although I'm a dog person. However, to me, that was real comfort, because you're spending time with a therapy animal. And that's what the animals are doing. They're giving us therapy. The shoes and the roller skates, I like the roller skates because now we have time. We're quarantined at home, and you can put on a mask and you can go out and spend time going with the roller skates. But I also like the running shoes, because either the new pastime is that they're running to de-stress, or the shoes are outside so that the germs stay outside. But I like the offices because no one envisioned that that's what home-based work was going to be, and that is our new office. And it may be the way we now conduct ourselves for the next couple of years. And that's all I have to say.
Oh, great. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I really liked your input there. Does anybody have any other thoughts too on the themes that they pulled out from their own observation of the photo they had? Or want to talk a bit about the photo that they were chosen, that they were tasked with observing?
Hi, Natalie. I was in breakout room 3 with Francis, and we focused on the theme of outside, which was, so there's that theme, but also there was a theme of kind of like a reemergence of a childhood hobby that there was now time to experience again, and the funness and excitement of taking the picture before strapping those skates on, because they look brand new. You can't even see any skids on the wheel, so it looks like you can feel that excitement almost just when the picture's snapping just before maybe they're in their driveway or somewhere outside where the skates are on their deck.
Yeah, I really like that, how you guys focused on that. That's really awesome.
Natalie, I'm going to jump in here because those are my skates. And the skates were brand new for that photograph. I've broken them in since, but yeah, it's interesting, Heather, that you would pick up that kind of, that level of detail. You should be a detective. Maybe that's what this ethnography thing is about, detective work, right?
Does anybody else want to talk about the picture that they had to observe and the themes they pulled out from it, possibly?
This is Lana. We talked about the changing landscape of offices and how after this ends, with as many people going to home offices and being just as productive, you'll see a big change in the in how work is completed and where it's completed.
Yeah, that's really great response. Yeah, because I don't think we're thinking about that, or how people are working from home and what does that mean for the future of any sort of remote work or any work in general. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Or yeah.
I was looking at photo number 2 with Edson, and we we talked about so much stuff, and we talked about how, this is our new normal in a lot of ways. We talked about how this photo likely might not be in somebody's home, probably in a workspace or a school space or in some other space that they're going to, and how for myself, I'm mostly at home. So I don't see reminders like this every single day. And we just talked about some of the different feelings that could be generated by looking at a sign like this, the fact that we must be reminded of it, even though we've come to now really feel like masks are quite common everywhere we go. Most people in most public spaces are wearing masks. So kind of thinking about that photo in terms of the context of the other photos, we felt like there might be some more kind of feelings of anxiety around this photo versus, for example, the skates or the dog.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Yeah, it's definitely a reminder that wherever we go, if it's not in our own home, we're constantly reminded about our new reality that we live in with masks and COVID-19. Okay, any last thoughts on this activity that they'd like to talk about? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to our next activity and about interviewing during COVID. So the observations that we just looked at only tell one side of someone's pandemic experience. Interviews can help to explore those other sides, helping to complete a more complete picture or help to tell the story a little bit better. So using interviewing as an ethnographic tool is a bit different than it has been normally, as they might normally take place in person in the best setting for both the interviewee and the interviewer. So for formal interviews now, like job interviews, most often there is rigid rules to be professional as possible, having a nice clean background and dressed super professional that you can be with whatever you have. But when we are interviewing for qualitative research, I don't think these rules are so rigid. And when they're not rigid, we get to explore more about that person that we're interviewing. So for this next activity, I'm first going to go over some tips for interviewing during COVID, and then send you once again into breakout rooms to explore these tips. So tips for interviewing for qualitative research in any capacity, especially to understand their experiences within the pandemic, need to be fluid, as everything could change throughout the interview. When you're forming questions, keep them open-ended and not as structured. A semi-structured interview format with guiding questions or even an unstructured interview format could be very useful. Interview types to use in video calls or even just phone calls, as it allows for a more fluid conversation to happen. Another tip is to really utilize your video background. Your video background is a reflection of you, your environment, and your existence at this very moment. So if it's possible to have your video background on, I would suggest having it on. And if it's possible for your interviewee, if they can have it on, which doesn't always happen the way you want it to happen, but they might have it on and they might feel comfortable if you have yours on. So I would suggest just having it on to create that atmosphere. And this could also allow for more observations during the interview, like why your interviewee may have a certain background, or what is their background telling you about themselves that you won't get through any verbal language that they're using. But ultimately, though, we need to remember interviews during this time are not going to be in the perfect environment, and people may be doing other things. So they may be in different places, they may have internet connection problems, but all of these things, including the internet connection problems, can tell us so much more about who we are interviewing and how they are handling the pandemic. And then follow up with those questions and the conversations about those imperfections, or like, why are they driving? Or like, what does that tell you about their life that you may not get from their interview questions or the ones you created yourself? So we're going to send you into breakout rooms again, and think of these interviews that you're going to do as semi-structured with strong conversational aspects. And guys will be in groups of 3 to 4 with 2 people interviewing each other. And then the third or fourth person will be observing the interview and what they might miss from the 2 people who are interviewing each other. And so once again, we're going to be using Mural. And so on the right-hand side of Mural is for our next activity. Same concept, just click on the little dot and add your thoughts about any of these questions that I'm going to go over really quick. And then these are the interview questions up here if you need a reminder. So our interview questions that we're going to be talking about are what have your feelings been throughout the pandemic? Have they changed over time? If so, how? In what ways have you had to change your behavior throughout the pandemic? And what have been some positive and negative aspects that you have experienced throughout the pandemic? So these are the questions that to guide your interviews between two people within the group. And these are also at the top of the activity board, so you can find them again. And then for those who are observing, we have some questions on the side for you to take notes about as well, about what themes did you gather, what did you see, what did you hear, what is in the background, and some behaviors too. What did you notice about how your interviewee was answering, and what did you notice about your interviewing technique? So if you're doing interviewing, keep this in mind as you're going through this activity. So yeah, and then once again, we'll be reporting out from your breakout rooms after you come back. So keep that in mind too. Do you guys have any questions about the mural or the activity? No? Okay, so Naisha, if you could send everyone into.
All right, all the breakout rooms are open.
Okay, awesome. All right, welcome back, everyone. It looks like we have everyone back. So we're just going to go over a quick debrief over this activity. So what themes did you guys gather? Does anybody want to talk about what they talked about in their interview groups? Any specifics or?
Heather was doing contact tracing in her working from home. And one of the things, like a insight that she raised, or an observation that she raised, is that stress levels for her were raised in connection to her home, just because she's doing very stressful work, but in the context of her living space. And that association with like stressful situations and her house was kind of a new challenge that she had to find ways to cope with and manage. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great observation that I don't think we hear too often about, and how that relates to home and everything. Does anyone else have any other interview thoughts or themes that they gathered from their groups?
You
can go ahead, sorry.
Oh, well, I talk plenty, but one of my colleagues, Mike, made a point that I said will stay with me maybe for the rest of the week, where he said, what if there's something bigger than COVID? You know, we were all so disorganized and unprepared, you know, for this event. And I mean, it was just a thought that's stuck with me. I'm like, wow, not an ethnographic study kind of thought maybe, but just a little wow moment.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
More of an existential question. So I was in a group with Matthew and Sneha, and I neglected my notes, but it was a really great conversation. And kind of like the previous activity, like Matthew exhibited really great ways of dealing with the pandemic and channeling his energies and focus towards others, and just keeping a perspective about everything that's happening and his position in it in relation to others was really cool to hear about.
Nice. Does anyone else have any themes they'd like to go over, what they talked about or what you heard in your group?
This is Lana. I heard in the group that I was in with Jeff and I think Katie. about shopping patterns, how people's shopping patterns have changed, the closure of brick and mortar stores when the explosion of online shopping.
Oh, yeah, that's very interesting. I think definitely, I know I have increased my online shopping habits. I'm sure many other people have too. So that's a good observation that your interview group really came up with. Any other thoughts? Last minute thoughts?
I was in a group, and one of the things that I observed was about the relationship between the interviewee and then the interviewer. And what I observed is that there seems to, at least like in the setting in the group I was in, when Chelsea was being interviewed, there was a sense of openness and willingness to share, very deep feelings, or very, which then sort of shows her vulnerability. And I think, I respect, I really appreciated that there was a connection that was made immediately, that then allows you to be able then to understand what some of the inner thoughts of those who's being interviewed. So I think it's something that you need to sort of establish when you're interviewing, the kind of rapport and relationship. So I saw that it was established very quickly and effectively.
That's a good point, and I'm glad your group really got straight to that and had the rapport developed, because I think with interviews and with ethnographic research, rapport is something we are going to be struggling with a little bit in establishing. And so because we all are interviewers at some point, we just need to think about how the other person might be feeling, or things that could easily establish that rapport that you might not get with normally. With ethnographic research, could take weeks or months to even establish, but we're doing it all virtually. So we need to come up with more creative yet human ways to quickly establish that rapport, like your group did. Okay, so that was great, guys. I'm so glad we got you guys had such great observations about this activity, and I'm so glad. So basically that's the end of it that I have right now. Obviously, ethnography during COVID-19 has its challenges, but it's about turning those challenges into new opportunities that you may not normally get in typical ethnographic research. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. And I do believe we can better understand how people are living with the use of some of these techniques and others that you may have developed throughout your own activities that you completed here today. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask right now or in the chat box? Welcome to, or not, it's up to you guys.
Hiya. Hi, Shelley here from the UK. Nice to meet everyone. I was just wondering, I was just saying to Kim and that I was, my PhD is using ethnography, like looking at netnography and autoethnography, but I'm really interested in if any of you guys have like a group that you belong to, or whether you, I don't know whether you have any sort of, I don't know, I'm trying to think now, I don't know, anything like that I could maybe connect with, because I'm really looking at sort of saturating myself in everything as ethnography, really. So I don't know if anyone has anything or wants to set one up. I don't know whether anyone has.
That's a great suggestion. I guess now is a good time for us to plug Taylor, and we don't have a group like that, but we do have a mailing list. So like if you visit our website, which is taylor.tulane.edu, there's a banner at the top of it, yes, where you can sign up for our mailing list, and you can find out about other events that we have. You can come to all of our workshops, right? This one is called Ethnography, but all of the workshops are actually, we're actually going to be using qualitative methods. So, we're borrowing anthropological tools for all of the workshops. The next workshop is about poetry. you know, using poetry in research, which is something where people are like, what, can we do that? Yes, you can use poetry as a research method. So we'll share the way some other people have used poetry, and we're going to be doing a little bit of poetry in the workshop as well. I have a screaming child in the background. Well, he's playing. If you hear any screaming noises, he's just very excited and playing, and he's not in trouble. So I really want to thank Natalie for this workshop, which I thought was really exciting. I would love to know where people are from. So if you could tell us in the chat, and I would really love to see a lot of you at our next workshop. And actually, we have 5. I'm going to post all 5 links as well. If you want to also drop your, so this is where the chat gets very exciting. If you also want to drop your LinkedIn handle or stuff like that, so that people can connect with you again, all of that is possible. Okay. And Natalie, I know we're ready to drop off, but I'm gonna pass it back to you or Naisha if anyone wants to say anything, or anyone from the audience actually.
Yeah, does anybody have any final thoughts or anything? I want to thank you guys again for coming. I'm really glad that this has been super fun and successful, and that you guys got so much out of it. I love ethnography. It's my background, so yeah. Any final thoughts?
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. It was really great.